Hello and welcome back to the CFCTALK podcast. And again, I said this last time and I said Man United is a must-win game, but Chelsea end up in a draw. A big weekend for a lot of sports fan. Cricket's on, football's on, F1 is on as well this weekend, as well as the UFC and the other chat and the other sports going on. But in terms of a Chelsea fan, we won't be too happy with this weekend. And tonight, joining me today, Akash. Thank you very much for joining. But how are you doing? How has it been? Diwali, obviously in India this weekend. I'm sure there must be a lot of fireworks from India, Pakistan as well today. That was a big game as well.
Yep. Yep. So for me, for my hometown, Diwali isn't that big a deal because we're
Yeah.
down in the south, and but for now I'm in Delhi, and I think Diwali plus the India win has people celebrating like mad. So you probably can't hear because I think Zoom cancels a lot of the noise, but there's a lot of fireworks going on. So yeah, good times.
No, yeah. I mean, the one place where there are no fireworks was Stamford Bridge last night. Chelsea won, Man United won. A big tactical battle between Eric Ten Hag and Graham Potter. It was nice to see. It was nice to see two managers making those substitutes, canceling each other's tactics out. But in the end, we conceding another last minute goal, 90 plus 4 minutes. I mean, that's two big games, Man United as well as that Tottenham game where we've conceded in the 90 plus minutes and lost out on 3 points. But just before we dive into the first half and the lineups, before we dive into that, your quick thoughts in overall in terms of Potter so far and that performance against Man United and Brentford maybe on the midweek.
For sure. So I think before Potter came to Chelsea, I think he was one of my favorite managers outside of the obvious big six, right? They were a really, really fun team to watch. But when he does come to Chelsea, he does bring in. You start to notice, I think, a bit more of the negatives. And it's very early on in his reign. He's barely getting time on the training pitch because the matches are coming so thick and fast. So I think right now it's more of trying to figure out what works best. Still trying to learn the layout of his squad. What profiles he has, what profiles he needs. So I think at least another couple of windows before you actually start to see. But it is Chelsea. He has to pick up points in the interim, and he's done pretty well, although it has been with teams of maybe questionable quality. So but there have been positives, but I'm invested in the journey, interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, no, I think there is no concern in terms of Chelsea. I know there will be comments on Twitter, but no one really takes them seriously about
Yep.
Potter not being the right appointment and bringing Tuchel back and this and so on, and people being reactionary. But Graham Potter is a long-term coach at Chelsea, and people need to start realizing that we're not going to get off to a Champions League win in the first season, or we're not going to get 1 point in behind Arsenal and Man City in the Premier League this season, but 5 years down the line, we might have a squad which end up like Man City winning titles every year, and maybe not bosh up the Champions League as Man City's done in the previous years. But looking at the lineup that was announced on the night, Chelsea going with a back three, Cucurella playing as that left center back was what was reported. Azpilicueta, I guess, as the right wing back or the right back with Loftus Cheek helping him out in that area, and Ben Chilwell. A bit of a change from Brentford. It was. What did you think of the starting lineup and whether or not Pulisic would have started? Because for me, I think Pulisic deserved that start, and I know we're going to get into that first half and that second half and how Aubameyang and Sterling performed, but just before that game started, what were your thoughts and why did you not why did you think Pulisic was not given the head start ahead of Sterling or Aubameyang or Mount in that case in those front three positions?
uh, the only plausible reason I can think of is there are games, a lot of games even in October, right? And we have the Champions League game coming up next. So my thought process was that Potter wants to save Pulisic for those games, or either bring him on as an impact sub, and he did come on as well, but didn't get enough time to actually leave his mark on the game. And especially with how lackluster the attack's been, as in they're not showing the capability to even hold on to a ball, right? And Pulisic, whenever he's come on, has been lively. He's been direct. He's been running at people. So I think he deserved a start. Was a little disappointed with the lineup to see him not get a start, but Potter knows best. He sees them on the training ground always. And I think more concerns for me in terms of the midfield, right? Even though we were going with United went with Ericsson instead of Fred, and my thought process was Ericsson would be dropping deep, maybe alongside Casemiro. Maybe their plan was to sit off us, but I think they completely surprised us with how intense they were in the first half. We couldn't even hold on to the ball for more than 3, 4 passes at a time. And definitely a lot of concerns there. Our midfield is literally hanging on by Kovacic's ankle ligaments right now, which is very concerning. We splashed a lot of cash, but the engine room is where you need bodies, right? And you have Zakaria who's badly getting minutes there. So a few concerns, especially with the amount of games we'll play before the World Cup. But I'm hoping Potter can find some work around there. So.
Yeah, you're right in saying the midfield is an issue for Chelsea, and that Man United coming at us with so much intensity in that first half was completely unexpected. Because Man United haven't been the team who have gone and pressed hard and fought off the ball a lot this season. And under Ten Hag, I've seen a few games, and even that Brentford game when they lost 4-1. I know those are early days, but it it was a very different Man United team in terms of they didn't come here for a draw. Or they didn't come here as thinking, well, Ronaldo's out of the squad. We don't have players in form. We're just gonna play it out, get a draw, and go back home. They came here for 3 points, and they know that they haven't been beaten by Chelsea since 2017 in the Premier League. So they wanted to make sure that record came stayed the way it is. But Koulibaly obviously didn't. I don't think Koulibaly started, and that was because of a knee issue in terms of the lineups as well. And then Thiago Silva, who came in, and Ben Chilwell. Honestly, in my opinion, the defense was something to really think positively about, because I think honestly, Thiago Silva just putting up such an incredible performance. I know Chalobah was named man of the match. And as you mentioned, the midfield is a big issue for Chelsea. And if it continues like this, it'll be very concerning. And I know I want to get into this talk about Zakaria and what your thoughts are, but towards the end of the podcast after this discussion about Man United. But, Trevor Chalobah, 30 starts, if I'm not wrong, for Chelsea, 22 wins, 9 draws, 0 losses. And he is yet to be defeated in the Premier League, at least for Chelsea. Your thoughts on that and that pairing with Thiago Silva and what they can do this season?
Yep. So again, great journey to see, right? He has done his due diligence in terms of he's gone out on loan multiple times, multiple places. I think he played for Huddersfield in the Championship, went out to League One, was one of the best, statistically one of the best midfielders there, and he's come back and he's now making his place completely different position, and he's still sort of learning the ropes. I think last year there were a couple of instances where if you see someone running directly at Trevoh Chalobah inside the box, you're a little concerned because he has that tendency to dive in, a bit of a rash streak there, but he's sort of coming down a lot. Last year, in terms of ball progression, his numbers weren't great. And again, you're comparing him with people like Reece and Thiago Silva, so obviously not a very fair comparison. But he's adding to that element of his game as well. He's cutting out a lot of the silly errors, and he's young. He will make mistakes, but we have to be patient with players like this, right? And very very happy with how under Tuchel there was talk that he was going to leave, but he's now come back and he's making his mark in the squad. There's even talk that he might go with England to the World Cup, if I'm not wrong. And very happy for such a young player to be showing so much quality. Outside of Trevor Chalobah, I think Kukurea is finding it a little difficult now. Again, new team, completely different way of playing. Even though it's the same manager, I think the demands are pretty different that are being placed on Cucurella right now. Brighton, with all due respect to them, did not create as many chances as people think they did last season. They, in terms of big chances created, I think they were around 9th or 10th in the Premier League, and that sort of reflects their league position as well. But having to be so much more proactive with his passing right now, I think totally different demands, and he's finding it a little difficult. But there's definitely enough quality in there to become a top player, and I think yep, our fan base just has to be a little bit more patient with him there.
We need to realize Kukurea is someone who's playing out of position at the moment for a lot of the
Yep.
games. Yes, he can play left center back, but his preferred option, his preferred position is a left wing back and left back. It's exactly like saying right now, if I slot in Aspi as a center back or a Reece James as a center back, that's a more of a realistic comparison. Where if I set in Reece James as center back, yes, he's going to do a good job defensively, but Reece James is not in this team just because he can make 2 or 3 tackles, intercept the ball. He is in this team because he's got the ability to come up, support the attacking players, and then be aware of what his defensive roles are, which obviously Aspi doesn't have at the moment because of his age. And other factors as well. So with Cucurella, you're right in saying we need to be more patient. We just need to just give him time, settle into the team. And right now, it's one of those where neither of Cucurella or Chilwell are performing incredibly well to a point of what Chilwell was doing last season before that injury. For Potter to say, well, this player has to start every single game, or this player has to play in this position, and we haven't seen much from Chilwell or Cucurella in general. So it's not that we can sit here and say, well, Chilwell plays better in that position or Cucurella, because more or less they've been pretty similar in terms of playing in that left back or left wing back role. But Reece James being injured means Azpilicueta comes in, and we're really finding out the struggles that Chelsea have on that right hand side, and how much Reece James is being missed out, just in terms of attacking opportunities that he creates, the chances that he creates, and the spaces that he finds with linking up with Mount, and then that support to Sterling as well when there's a switch in the wings. But Aspi, it's like I don't want to go into and say anything about Aspi because he's a legend, and yes, Chelsea don't have a backup right back. He is the only backup we have. And if we knew that if we've already experienced it with Chilwell last season, and if we were prepared for it, we should have got and done our deals early with a right back and gotten someone similar to Reece James to replace him. And which is what we did with Cucurella, because we realized, well, Chilwell was out for X amount of months last year, and it cost us so many games. So your thoughts on how Chelsea can maybe figure out that position, because Aspi clearly isn't what the best option in there until Reece James comes back, hopefully after the World Cup.
Got it. So for me, Aspie can still do a job, but he needs protection. I think if you're playing him at wing back, you either need a really, really proactive defender who'll step out of the line and
If
help
I
him
may
out.
just come in,
Yeah,
but yeah, I
got it.
agree with you. Like Aspi, I've said this many a times on the podcast, and a lot of people on Twitter say, "Well, you're just being a bit biased because he's Aspi." And I want to make it very clear, like, yes, he can do a job, but you can't expect him to be at the
Yep,
level of Reece James, or
totally
be
fair. Yeah.
be attacking and then 1 minute go back and defend as well. And sorry to interrupt, but yeah, you're right in saying that he needs cover.
Yep. So he needs someone who's proactive, will step out of the line and help him out if he's struggling 1v1. I think Fofana was that kind of player, very, very aggressive. And if you see how often he steps out, he backs himself to win those 1v1s, and that's precisely the kind of player we need. Bad luck that he's injured right now. We did chase a lot of backup. I think we chased Dumfries for a while. Not the biggest fan of Dumfries, but he's an okay player. He's pretty good 1v1. He's physically strong. He's not the kind of guy who'll put up maybe 15 assists a year, but he's decent. Kyle Walker-Peters was chased, but people didn't want him because you have Livramento, who we do have a buyback option on, but then again, he's coming back off an ACL injury. There's no guarantee that he'll be the same player. So why we didn't chase back up there didn't make too much sense to me. Jonathan Klaus was a very, very good option, and I think he's playing really well. If I'm not wrong, he's with Marseille right now. I could be wrong. League One, I watch only for PSG and the occasional Monaco game, but I think I did watch a recent PSG Marseille game as well. So very good option who we could have got for maybe 7 to 8 million. We didn't. Not having backup and class backup in these positions is a huge problem. You had Felipe Luis come in 14-15 when he was probably one of the best left backs in La Liga, and then he proceeded to be benched by Aspi, right? And that's how good a player Aspi was. Even out of position, Mourinho thought that he was maybe the best option there. And that's the kind of competition we need in the squad if we're going to eventually challenge City there. And kind of disappointing why we didn't proactively go ahead and make those signings. And I think the same applies for wide attackers and even in midfield as well. You lack so much quality 1v1 when the ball goes out into those wide areas, and the people picking it up are either Kai Havertz and Mason Mount. All due respect to them, are not the best out wide. Uh, so yeah, pretty, and I'm hoping that's something we address in January.
Yeah, I think what's even more surprising is the fact that right at the start of the window, if I'm not wrong, a lot of Chelsea accounts, a lot of journalists were reporting the fact that Jonathan Klaus is one of the main targets for Chelsea as a right back, because they know Aspi might leave by the end of this season. And flash forward a few months, and we hear this: Aspi signed a new 2-year contract, and not that I'm saying it was a wrong decision. Obviously, that was the only decision left to make at that point. But if Chelsea knew that that they might be in this situation, considering the amount of games there are this season, and the not just the amount of games, but as in the intensity of the games this season coming up every 2 or 3 days, we should have been more careful, and we should have just finished up that deal earlier. And to me, it just seems like, well, we could have extended Asby's contract and had Jonathan Klaus in this team, because Asby can still put in a shift at center back for me. I think he is still one of those options for me. And with Fofana being injured, Thiago Silva not being able to play every single game, it would have been a perfect opportunity for him to get some game time. And 2 years is not a lot for a player who's given everything to this club and who may just want to, end his career at Chelsea FC because of what he's achieved at the club. So it's a bit disappointing, and those flaws are now coming out because of Reece James's injury. And I feel like because of how good Reece James is, everyone at Chelsea's board would have just gone, well, we'll just handle it. Reece James is there to cover it up for us this whole season, and that's how it went. So yeah, it is one of those where we do need to look into it in January and maybe next summer, because there isn't a lot of noise around that right now. But midfield is one area where I think it's very, very easy to pick out on what's needed and what's required. A natural number 6 when Kante is not playing. We can really see Jorginho getting picked out of position. We can really see Loftus-Cheek not being able to do his defensive duties. And what surprises me is on deadline day, Zakaria was sold as one of those number 6 signings that Chelsea need this season to counter the injuries Kante is going to face, or to take off the workload that Kante and Jorginho will have. And there is no sign of him on the pitch, not even as a substitute, not even in games where we're leading 2-0 and you just want to run down the clock and you just want to give some players a time. And there are a few players who haven't had a lot of opportunities, and Ziyech being one of them, but that I can agree with. But the Zakaria situation to me just doesn't make any sense. When you ask Potter about it, he said there's no decision being made, the loan may be cut short and stuff like that, which makes no sense to me, because I guess maybe he's seen something in training or something's happened in training what we don't know about. But as far as I can see, Zachary has done nothing wrong for him not to be able to get any minutes in a busy schedule like this, where there's game every 2 and 3 days. So I don't know about the midfield issues, but what are your thoughts on that?
Zacharias was obviously a Tuchel back signing, right? Someone maybe he knew from the Bundesliga as well. And from my memory of Zachariah, I think I remember watching him when Marco Rose was there, and they had Alessandro Pli and Thuram's, and I keep forgetting his name. So those two players, and he was pretty competent in the middle of the park. He was mopping, loose balls up. He was keeping the ball ticking over, and not a world class player, but he was pretty decent. I remember watching him in Juventus as well. After I think he came back from COVID, he had a knee injury, and the difference was stark. As in, he was not the same player that he was, and I think the thought process behind bringing him here was he would eventually recover the form that he had shown at Gladbach. But people are voicing concerns over his conditioning as well. That he's nowhere near match fit enough to start a game for Chelsea, and that is concerning. So if he passed a medical for us, how is he not fit enough to start? And that's concerning. And if we're cutting things short in January, then I'm hoping there's a solid plan behind it. I'm hoping we either sign Edson Alvarez from Ajax, I think, who we chased very embarrassingly on the last day of the window and failed to get him, or we go all out on Declan Rice or whoever else the manager wants. This has gone on for so long, right? We've been calling out for a robust presence in midfield for like since Frank Lampard was here, and we're still here debating over the same weaknesses in midfield, and it's a little boring right now. Just get someone in, plug those gaps, and let other players get along with what get on with what they want to do. And if coaches gets injured, which is very likely considering the amount of games we play, then we go into uh, you know the pre-World Cup and maybe the few games after with just Jorginho and Ruben Loftus-Cheek as our only fit options, which is a scenario I do not want to see, right? And hoping that's addressed in Jan.
Yeah, Kovacic's situation, I think Potter as well made it very clear in the post-match when he was asked why Kovacic didn't start, and he said, well, Kovacic isn't fully match fit, and when asked in detail, he said there are still issues with Kovacic and his injury, but we're trying to manage his game time to make sure that he gets minutes, and at the same time making sure that it doesn't affect his injury and he continues to play. Because Chelsea right now in midfield don't have a lot of options. They can't just bring on whoever they want. Kovacic is probably the only one who can come on, make an impact when Jorginho and Loftus-Cheek are on the pitch. Gallagher has had a few good performances, but nothing incredible as well. And that performance against Brighton when he played in that pivot just didn't work. So I think that's one of the reasons why he was dropped out for Man United. And and we saw how Brighton pressed us in that first half, and Man United did the exact same thing. And at times we did see Loftus-Cheek lose out on the ball. Jorginho get dispossessed as well. The passes, as you mentioned, in the first 45 minutes were a really struggle for Chelsea to even string a few passes together. But in the front three, the biggest issue that we saw was Sterling and Aubameyang gone missing on that day, and all this talk about these two signings just vanishing, and Pulisic being the man and Broja being the two people who had to come on and try and put some threat on that Man United defense, try and create those chances or take those opportunities. But Sterling, a lot of people were saying that you as a winger who's cost so much to Chelsea, you expect him to be able to dribble past players. And to that, I was like, well, look at him at Man City. You've got someone like De Bruyne who creates those incredible through balls for him, and all he has to do is just use his pace, get in behind the defenders, and make that final pass or just take the shot. And Sterling's never been known to be the talisman, the guy you aim for a goal. It's always you pass it to Sterling, he creates a chance, and it's either Harry Kane for England or one of the strikers at Man City, depending on who's playing, to do it. But a lot of people seem to have disagreed with me on that. So I just want to know what your thoughts are, and his role, I guess, different. His role at Chelsea being a lot different than Man City.
Got it. So I think the best version of Sterling that I remember was 17-18. You had that attacking five of which included Sterling and Sane basically attacking opposite ends of the box, and then you had people like De Bruyne, David Silva, and Bernardo Silva pulling strings behind them. And it was one of the most fun teams to watch. And a lot of Sterling's goals, if you notice, are cutbacks or him making that run on the blind side of the defender, right? And for that for that you need quality service. You had people like Kyle Walker, Kevin De Bruyne, and even Leroy Sané putting things on a plate for Sterling. And do you have that quality at Chelsea? Obviously you don't. I rate Mount very highly, but I think he's at that point in his career where there's one progression that he has to make in terms of quality. He created somewhere close to, I think, 58 to 59 chances last season, and if you filter it down by big chances, I think he made like 9 or 10 big chances. Your primary creator can't be putting up those numbers over a season, right? I'm not being very critical. He's one of my favorite players, and I'm invested in the journey for sure. But I have expectations because I know how talented he is. You go to a team like Liverpool, where your right back puts up 90 chances a season. You go to United, where even though they weren't as good as we were last season, Bruno Fernandes laid on close to 100 chances. And this is just looking at the raw numbers, right? Even if you see how Mount picks the ball up, maybe close to the box, his decision making isn't quite there yet, which is fair. He's a fairly young player, and it's similar even if you look at other players like Kai Havertz or whoever else picks the ball up close to goal. But for Sterling, again, I'm a little disappointed because the areas where he picks up the ball on occasion are a little deeper than he was at City on the left wing. But he does get into those good positions in and around the box, but doesn't do enough with it. Aubameyang has been great last few games, but again, couple of disappointing performances. So not going to throw too much criticism his way. Chelsea isn't a team where we spend this amount of money, but still, sort of come back after every match and say there are issues with creativity or issues with chance creation. We do not have that excuse. We've spent too much money and done too much counting, looked at every single league for us to still not know what the answer is. And I'm hoping that that's something Potter is looking very closely at and something that we have a concrete plan for. And I think hopefully Nkunku comes in and maybe we look at someone like Ivan Tony and we bring those profiles together and make something work, but that can't happen soon enough. It's been too long this year.
Because it's always nice to see that a new manager comes, there's a new manager bounce where you're winning games on the trot. But Yes, bar those two Milan performances, we've played Wolves, Brentford, and Aston Villa, and two of them were convincing wins. One was a draw, and now against Man City, we've seen a few of the negatives of Potter ball, if you want to call it. And I know it's still very early days; it's too early to judge anything. And obviously, Bowley being very vocal about what he wants to do in January, and he's wasting no time, and he wants to use as much as what he can in the January window to try and lure in some players. But it's a long season ahead for Chelsea, and we really need to be prepared for what comes. And with the whole Sterling and Aubameyang situation, I feel like they'll come. They'll eventually it'll all settle in and it'll all work out. But Pulisic has been someone who's been surprising under Graham Potter. A few sub performances. Coming off not sub performances, a few performances off the bench. I don't want to say sub performances because it just sounds like I'm trying to take away from his performances, but he's been really good off the bench, and as you mentioned, the impact sub. But is it time for Potter to really think about it and go, well, I want to see what Pulisic can do in a full 90 minutes, or at least right from the start of the game, if he plays the 60, 70 minutes, and maybe bring on Sterling later on, because we've got a important Champions League win, not a win, but a Champions League game coming up against RB Leipzig, and a win would secure qualification, maybe not first place or first spot, but what a win away at Salzburg would be still a great win for Potter, and a great continuation of his tenure at Chelsea at the moment. So would you look at it and go, Pulisic has been someone who's been quite promising? Would you start him on that day?
For sure. Havertz scored that header, but general play has been very, very poor this season. Not being harsh on him, but he hasn't shown one reproducible skill set, right? He doesn't have the feet to beat him and doesn't have the eye for a pass in the final third to create consistently enough. So, and I think he has an aerial presence and physical presence about him, but that isn't enough reason to start a player. Pulisic has shown that he can, take on a guy on his day. He can definitely go toe to toe with maybe the best defenders in the league if he backs himself, that is. And Sterling again is blowing hot and cold, so no harm in giving Pulisic a start. I ideally want to see him get a run of maybe 3-4 games, where he can, sort of you need to maybe beat a person once to then get the confidence and creative juices flowing again. You ideally have to think, okay, even if he is someone like maybe if you're up against the best 1v1 defender in the league, a winger going into 50-50 still has to back himself to make that dribble or beat him. And I don't think Pulisic is in that frame of mind yet. And for that, he needs game time. And 15, 16 minutes at the end of games is not going to cut it. So if you do have a plan to give him a contract, and if there are plans to integrate him into the mainstream squad, then start doing it right now, because can't be a better time. We're not doing too great up front anyway. So
Yes, exactly. Because you can keep giving him those 15, 20 minutes at the end of the game, but it's consistency. And with Pulisic, one of the big issues that we had in previous seasons was, well, he can't be consistent because when he does come on every now and then, he gets injured. There's issues in terms of his fitness and so on and so forth. But now finally we've got a Pulisic who isn't injured, who's ready to play, who's shown that he can play, and all he needs is just the backing of the manager, a few good games, and he'll be ready in no time. So realistically, if I'm Potter, I can't think of a reason why I wouldn't start him against Salzburg. And it's not one of those games where he himself will start thinking, well, I'm the second choice, because it's still an important game for Chelsea. It's still a must-win game, and it's still one of those where we need to scrape away a win, whether it's a 1-0 or 2-0 win. So Pulisic for me has to start. Havertz, you're right in saying, look, I'm not just. I know I'm probably going to sound harsh. I'm probably going to sound reactionary on this one, but I'm just done with Havertz right now. I
yeah.
honestly, I am so done with him. And I said this about Pulisic a few months ago. I said this about Ziyech a few months ago, that they do not have the attitude right now to play for Chelsea. And I don't mean it because they're not Chelsea made or Chelsea level or all that BS that people talk about on Twitter. But Aubameyang and Broja have shown much more than Havertz right now on the pitch. And to me, when Havertz starts, it's just insulting to both of those guys who've been pretty much the two talismans for Chelsea right now. And specifically for Broja, because even though he's not been getting those goals, even though he might not be getting those assists each game, but he is someone who's putting in the effort. He's someone who chases after the ball. He's someone who's pressing. He's someone who's helping out the team in whatever is required. Whereas in Havertz, I haven't seen that against Brentford. I didn't see that in the starts that he had before that. And that is one of the big reasons why I don't even think he featured against Man United, which honestly, fine by me. Yes, we spent a lot of money on him, but if you're not performing, take a few days off, take a few games off, go into the training ground, work on your skills, work on stuff, come back fresher. Because there's no point us or Potter giving players chances just because it's Havertz, just because it's Raheem Sterling. We've spent 80 odd million on him, just because it's Aubameyang coming in for a year or so on and so forth. If Broja is doing well, Broja starts. If Pulisic's doing well, Pulisic starts. It's end of the game. There's no big names in Chelsea. There's no small names in Chelsea. It has to be totally based off performance. It has to be totally based off tactics. It can't be your experience of the last 20 years in the Premier League or your Champions League experience and this and that. At one point, I think Chelsea fans were fine with Mount being benched because we realized he needs a break. He's been exhausted with the amount of games he's played. The effort he's put in last season, start of this season, and we knew, look, he took a few games off. He came back, suddenly he's a different Mount. Every single game now he's trying to do his best. He's showing what he can do, and he's coming back to the form that he was in the last season, in that Champions League winning season. So a lot of those fans on Twitter who think, well, benching Havertz this game is unnecessary. Well, no, it is necessary, because sometimes you need those kind of you need that to get into the player's head for them to actually stand up and react and go, well, if I'm not going to be on the team sheet, then I need to work my ass off and get on there. And I know it's a bit reactionary in terms of Havertz, but he just doesn't cut it for me in that squad, right? And not in that squad, but in that playing 11. So Broja, Mount, and Pulisic would be my ideal front three on that night against Salzburg. Because other than that, I just don't see any other attacking three up there on the night.
Yep, totally fair. A lot of people, not just you, I think, a lot of my friends are like done with Havertz, and
Yeah.
same thing, right? So I watched him at Leverkusen, and he seemed the kind of player who wanted to get on the ball a lot more. He was putting in those Juan Mata type of passes. He was picking the ball up on the right wing, floating crosses and passes in, but he's badly done that at Chelsea, right? And he, there's like, I can count on one hand the number of games where I've sat back and said, okay, Kai was amazing. There was that game against Fulham where he got a double, and I think there were a couple more games. Real Madrid, the semi-final. I think the second leg he played almost like a prime Berbatov did. We thought this is the homecoming of Kai Havertz right here, but then things just died out. And he's been tried at almost every single position people said he'd fit in. He still hasn't produced. So I have made my peace with the fact that we might cut our losses, and if we can trade him with Bayern for someone like Musiala, who for me will be one of the top three players in the world. I think a couple of years down the line, perfect. Let's go for it then. So,
yeah, I think if we do get a right offer, and I know we had this talk I had this talk on the podcast last week where I said, well, if Havertz keeps on doing this, I think Boli's pretty public about the fact that they're interested in Nkunku. Liao's one of them as well. Jonathan Klaus is one of them. Jonathan Davis is one of them as well on that list. So Boli isn't shying away from the fact that, well, I'll spend another 200 million if I have to in the winter to make sure this team stays up. And it is one of those ruthless moves that Roman Abramovich does as well, and Marina did as well while at Chelsea. So it's either he just stands up and says, well, I've had my fair share of time at Chelsea, and he leaves, or he gets up and says, I'm going to put on my boots, I'm going to go train next an hour, train 2 hours, train 3 hours, make sure next game I'm doing this, I'm doing that, just set goals for himself and just get back into it. Because it just there is no consistency. We can't have him, as you said, play like Prime Berbatov one game and then suddenly disappear for the next 5, and then him come back as well. We just can't afford that at a club which plays about 60-70 games in all competitions all season, where you need players to perform every single day, every single week. So it'll be interesting to see what Potter goes with in terms of the attacking options. There's not a lot to pick from, I guess, in the defense and midfield. But other than obviously the goalkeeping position, we can't really blame Kepa. And I just want to come back on this as well. A lot of those guys trying to blame Kepa for not saving that goal. I kid you not, you have not watched football. You really need to have a look at how football is played, because this guy has kept a clean sheet for 10 straight hours, 600 minutes of not conceding a goal. And it's not because of the defense. Let me get that clear. The reason why he has more saves than any goalkeeper in the Premier League right now is because our defense isn't really good at blocking out shouts. And the saves that he made against Aston Villa, Man United, Brighton as well, they are some incredible saves, and he has really put in the shift in training. You can tell, because this guy is come here and he knew there's a new manager that's a reset option for him. He came in, took his chance, he got that one chance and he took it, and he's been there for that. And I feel for Mendy as well. He was an incredible goalkeeper, but at Chelsea it's ruthless. You're performing, you get on the team sheet. You're not performing, you stay out. And even at Salzburg, I wouldn't risk it. I'd just stick with Kepa right now. Maybe give Mendy that chance against Man City in the Carabao Cup, but too soon to bring Mendy on, in my opinion, in that position.
Yep, I think the Kepper case is more of people just wanting to be proven right. There's a lot of people who put their chests out on Twitter and said, okay, Kepa is not good enough to play for Chelsea. And when he started actually doing well, and I think this applies to Jorginho and Kovacic as well. So many of people have taken their stand that they can't stand it when Jorginho or Kovacic don't perform well, which makes no sense to me. They play for Chelsea. If they play well, our team plays well. So. And similar for Kepa as well, right? He had a great comeback into the squad, and people, if you watch a game with tinted lenses, and if you watch a game wanting to be proven right, I think that's a shit way to watch football. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in the aftermath. And it was just a great header. There's no legislating for a header of that quality. And I think Chilwell had a chance to get to the ball, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
And
the cross.
those lapses happen again. I wouldn't throw too much blame on a player, but these things happen. And he made an attempt. Just him getting to the ball with a frame that small or a wingspan that small is commendable enough. And I'm seeing people say he's not tall enough to be a goalkeeper. I'm sure there have been shorter goalkeepers in football. And yep, Kepa deserves his chance. He'll play against Salzburg for sure, because I think Potter trusts him, needs his quality on the ball to be
No,
distributing
yeah,
from back. So
there
yeah.
is absolutely no reason to not pick Kepa, except those people on Twitter trying to spread an agenda, I guess. But yeah, no way we can blame Kepa for that. If anything, it's their own defense to blame. It's their own attack to blame for not scoring goals. Because right when Tuchel was here, I think a lot of what we were complaining about was we're scoring a few goals, but we're also conceding goals. If we're scoring two, we're conceding two. If we're scoring three, we're conceding three. Under Potter, we stopped scoring. We're not scoring as much, but we're also keeping a lot of those clean sheets. And if our attackers are just able to score one or two goals a game, it should be good enough to play the game out. We don't expect, as fans, we can't expect them to play Man City like football where we're scoring 4 or 5 goals. We've got someone like Haaland up front who can just come after every single loose ball and press the opposition and mentally just get in their heads and break down the defense. We just can't do that. We can't afford that. What we can afford is the fact that we can just play out the game after a goal, 2 goals. And that's what annoyed a lot of us against Man United, because when in the 86th minute Jorginho scores that penalty, a lot of us sit back thinking a Chelsea team of Graham Potter with that defense should be able to handle the next 10 minutes minimum. We should be able to go. And it was one of those where we lost another 2 points because of the header in the end. And that same thing happened at Tottenham as well. Too late, a late goal by Højbjerg, and then that Harry Kane with that header getting into the box. But yeah, it is what it is. Tough game against Man United, still above them on the league table. Long way to go. A lot of games to come. Salzburg on the midweek and Tuesday as well. So when you guys are watching this tomorrow, it'll be and it'll be an interesting watch as well. But for those of you guys watching, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because I'm trying to go to the Zagreb game, and if I do, I will make sure to vlog it and then post it on here. So it'll be an interesting one as well. But Akash, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for giving us your time once again. Love the fact that you're still up for a convo at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in India.
Anytime.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. For those of you guys watching, make sure to follow Akash on all of his social media pages. Follow us on all of our social media pages. Follow and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel to get the latest updates on Chelsea, as well as the reviews and best guests coming on each single episode. But that's it for now. And thank you very much for listening in, and we'll see you next time. Until then, stay